Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, whatever you may be. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a live broadcast on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn office hours. And if you've chosen to spend your time here with us, I'm extremely grateful. It's all about time and attention these days. And I'm so glad that you've decided to spend your time and attention here with us. Today, we've got a topic that is very close to my heart as I try to navigate the busy lives that we have and the busy daily routines that we create for ourselves. And I have a very dear old friend and colleague of mine, and I'm extremely happy to be having that conversation here with her. If you haven't come across me before, you haven't met me, my name is Christina.Charenkova. I am a change coach, and I love being in the context of change. I work with organization leaders and teams, and I enable them to go through large change transformations. I love that work because it is very diverse and it can be very emotional, and steering that journey brings me a lot of joy. And by night, I try to navigate and get a piece of stillness and quietness and try to quieten my brain. So I love that parallel between having a exciting and fulfilled daily schedule, and then a quieter sort of moments dotted throughout that we can quieten our monkey brains and really understand, what is really fueling us and where is the outcomes that we're hoping to get to. Now, as I said, today my guest is a special lady. We shared some years in a company called QBE Insurance together, and it was an exciting journey. We were working on a few large transformations together. She has made a shift, and I'd love to explore that journey with her, how she shifted from a corporate girl into a mindfulness expert and guru, and she can share some of her practical tips and tricks with us today. So without further ado, please welcome Rhian Thomas. Rhi, I will hand over the mic to you to give us a little bit about yourself, what led you on this journey, and some of your unique qualities that you'd like to share with our viewers today.
Thank you, Christina. It is such a pleasure to be here, and hello to everyone who's watching. It's really so lovely to connect with you all here on LinkedIn. So as Christina said, we worked together a number of years ago at QBE. I had a really long career in corporate, about 25 years. And I guess it's fair to say I always felt a little bit like a square peg in a round hole in corporate. It wasn't really my thing, even though I worked with amazing people and worked on some amazing projects over the years. I've been a yoga practitioner really for over 25 years, so pretty much since the start of my corporate career. And I think the fact that I have always had these mindfulness practices, which started with yoga for me, really have ensured that I have been able to work through my during the time I was in corporate, to keep very calm, to be very present, to not let work get on top of me, to keep that real balance in my life, and to be able to distance myself from things when I needed to, if I knew that they were going to kind of encroach on my sort of like nice, natural, emotional balance in the body. So a number of years ago, I guess, every time I think, it was only 2 years ago, but then I look back and I'm like, it was actually about 8 years ago now that I left corporate. How time flies. And I really stepped away to just do my own thing. So I started by, even though I'd been a yoga practitioner for a long time, I started by doing yoga teacher training. And then from there, I became a meditation facilitator and breath work. And now I coach people. So I either work, with people in group situations, or then one-on-one, and it's about teaching them all the tools of mindfulness, teaching them how to manage those situations when things come up, when to use the tools, because there's a whole suite of mindfulness tools, but you know, in the midst of overwhelm, you're not going to go and sit and meditate for 20 minutes, right? You need a different tool. So it's about teaching people what to use when, and also really helping people find the right tools for them, because it's not just about sitting cross-legged in the middle of a room or in the middle of the forest. You know, that's not practical for us, right, in our everyday lives, although it's lovely it would be. But teaching people to find that right practice, helping them through it, and then helping them, coaching them and mentoring through different situations and things. And I work with a broad range of people. So sometimes it's individuals, sometimes it's corporate. It really just depends. And I also have I'm here right now actually in my yoga studio. So, you know, I also teach yoga and meditation and breath work here face to face. That's my
Yes. And I think, Rhea, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for deciding to spend your time here with us, because I think it's important to educate, I think, people out in the corporate world who are extremely busy running projects, running teams, running their own schedule, trying to deliver outputs, trying to deliver products, trying to satisfy customers, all of these things. And I think a lot of the time we are caught in this cycle of doing. And it almost feels like cheating when you hit the pause button. It almost feels like you're not being as productive as what you should be.
And
But
I think,
I suppose, is one of those big lessons, right? So how do we turn that thinking around, and rather than thinking of this as cheating, really bank on the opportunity to hit pause?
I think the thing is that people think, like, we live in this world where we're told more is more. So then do more doing, you know, I haven't got and lots of people are wearing the busy badge. I'm so busy. But actually, what are we really achieving? Because the reality is, as much as, you know, they say women, for example, are multitaskers, you know, we can do a million things at once. The reality is that you can't. You can only do one thing at once. And when you don't take time to pause and you don't take time to be present, quite often, if you just keep going, you can make bad decisions, you can become overwhelmed. So, you know, you're not really performing at your best, right? You know, you might have 20 projects up in the air, but really, how much of our best self are we putting forward? I think we want to be in that position where we're doing not lots of things in a mediocre way, but, you know, the few important things, because we all know about strategy, right? And like, are you doing the stuff that you're meant to be doing in the business, or are you doing the stuff that that's nice to do? Are you doing the stuff that's going to be impactful? So it's about really then, when you stop and do mindfulness practices, what they're teaching us really, like, if we can kind of like get away from the fluffy stuff and what it really means, like get down to the nitty gritty. Like, when you do mindfulness practices, they're teaching you how to focus and they're teaching you how to concentrate. And from there, then a whole heap of other impacts ripple out. But that's ultimately what we're teaching ourselves to do. So if you can be more focused and have more concentration, you can be much more productive. You can make better decisions. You can deliver a better result for the business. You can be more impactful. Your team can be more impactful. The business can be more impactful and more successful. And from just doing these simple, small practices, right? Like, we're not saying you're going to need to go off and meditate for 7 years in Tibet, right? It's not about that. Just simple practices.
That would be lovely. Don't get us wrong. But yes, we live in the real world, and reality has to strike at some point.
That's maybe for a retreat once a year, you know.
And I know you're actually speaking from experience, because, as you said, you were working in a busy corporate world. We were working together on busy change projects, transformation programs, multiple employees impacted, running around, trying to mitigate all the different impacts, speaking to leadership, engaging different stakeholders on the journey, and so on. And you were able, throughout that busy, critical, stressful period, employ those mindfulness practices tell us a little bit about that. How did you do it, and what was the turning point for you to go, this actually makes sense?
It's funny because so my mindfulness journey started out from practicing yoga, and I was just very drawn to it. I didn't really know much about it. I just knew that it was just practice that came from India. And I started practicing, I was like 23 or 24. I was living in London. I was working at London Business School. And I just bought my book on Iyengar. So I used to, in my lunch break, I'd do a bit of yoga, and then I'd go to the lessons that were at the school because we had a gym there. And all of a sudden, within about 3 to 6 months, I really started noticing massive changes in myself. I've always been, I'm a very energetic person anyway, but I was quite fiery and I had bad temper, and I used to be reactionary. I didn't respond in a calm way, especially not all the time, not necessarily in work, but like what it's like when you're with close others, for example.
Yes.
And that was where I first noted the impact. I suddenly was calm. And things that were getting to me before and really just, infuriating me, they just stopped. And I was like, what has happened? Like, what has changed? And I realized it was yoga. And the reason yoga is amazing for this, and it's often the entry route, is we start at the physical route. Because we start through moving, we're joining the breath, and that's how we're connecting to the mind. And that's when everything starts to slow down. And also you get in yoga, I think you practice, Christina, if you're holding a pose for a
try. I'm not a pro, but that's my journey, and I'd love to improve and get there.
One of the things that we learn to do in yoga when we're holding a pose, we have to breathe through it. We have to breathe through the discomfort.
Yes.
And the mat, I call the mat, this is what I talked about my students about when they're here in the studio. The mat is our training ground to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and it grows this amazing sense of calm. And so, and then it's the same. So, you don't have to go. So if anyone's thinking, oh my God, I don't practice yoga, I don't even want to practice yoga. When it comes to mindfulness, you don't have to practice yoga, but there's always an element of movement connected to breath, which then moves on to then going into meditation. But that's how I started. And ever since then, I've just carried on, partly because I've always been somebody who loves physical movement anyway. So that's one of my passions. But just the transformation for me from that, and the fact that, really for so many years, I have been practicing yoga 5 or 6 days a week, really over for me. And then the longer I was practicing,
I think if we get to that, that's guru state.
But the longer I was practicing, then I used to practice a style of yoga called vinyasa, which has very strong breath work in it. So the breath work is fundamental to it all. So it's this linking. And then I moved into meditation over time as well. But, just the fact that when you're moving, even if you're just doing, I do a simple exercise with, some of my beginner meditators, where we just match the movement to the hands, opening and closing. And even that is meditation in itself. So, so that's how I basically got into it. And I just discovered it. And I've really been hooked ever since, because I've just found that it's kept me calm. It's kept me present, and if I have a moment where I've got a lot on my plate, I don't know what to do, I just stop and I just put everything down, and I just go over. You can maybe see behind me. I go over there and I sit and I breathe, and then everything, and then I come back to my desk and everything's fallen into place.
Yeah. I love a quote that you said earlier: get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think there's so much flux at the moment in the corporate world. There's so much uncomfortable. And I think getting people to be comfortable in doing that change takes work. And some of that work, can start with our physical being and then transform that into mind and kind of doing that journey without the stress and without the crisis.
Absolutely. I think one of the things, if I can just butt in here, is that, when you're being in this place where you're trying to get comfortable being uncomfortable, one of the things that you realize is that in order to get through that moment, you just have to be really present and breathe through it. And this is the other thing that mindfulness practices are teaching us, is that we can only have control over the moment that we're in right now. That's the only moment we have control over. So if you're in a really, really stressful situation, I know, it's difficult with the economy and things like that at the moment, or lots of change going on in work, everyone's expected to navigate it and, be like water off a duck's back. But, the reality is that it is hard. But then if you can just focus on being really present and doing what you can do now without worrying about what might have happened yesterday, which you literally have no control over anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then not projecting too much into the future. Obviously, the way we live now, there's always a bit of projection into the future because there has to be, we plan and all that kind of thing. But getting caught up in that monkey mind where you're imagining all these terrible things that might happen or could impact you in a certain way. If we can be really present and do everything that we can right now in the moment to control what's going on and manage what's going on, I don't really like the word control, manage what's going on in our lives, then we're in a much better place to deal with all the stresses that are thrown in front of us, because we're staying calm and in the moment, we're able to think clearly. We've got clarity, and this is another thing that mindfulness helps you with. It helps you with seeing things clearly, like lifting. We talk about in yoga practice, and I talk about yoga as the whole sphere of yoga, not just the asana, but like lifting the veil so we can really see what's going on and not being clouded by our attachments and stories that other people might told us, or the things you hear on the news. Like, it's about being really present and in yourself and focusing on what you can do right now, not the schmoz that's all around there,
And I suppose focusing on what you can control rather than all of the other stuff around it. And I think we get so overwhelmed by stuff that just sits on the outside, and it's most of the time things we cannot control. Just before we continue, I just wanted to say hello to everyone that must be joining us or is currently on the broadcast and we haven't said hello to, and it's joined a few minutes later. Please pop in where you're dialing in from, and we'd like to encourage as much dialogue as possible. If you've got questions for us or questions for any kind of tips, tricks, practical tips, please pop those in the chat and we'll make sure they get answered either during the broadcast, or if we run out of time, we'll definitely answer them after the broadcast. Now, Rhi, I know today we wanted to focus on leadership. We've called the broadcast the Enlightened Leader. And I think the corporate world is, how should I put this mildly, is running at 100 miles an hour. What are some of the practical tips that you've worked with your clients and you know that these things work? Some of the moments that people can hit pause during the day, perhaps, and give themselves that chance to take a breath, to be present. What are some of those enlightened moments that you can share with us?
Look, I mean, obviously one of the things I'm always going to recommend to somebody is, really, if you want to be in this place where you're like a calm, clear-headed, compassionate leader, full of confidence and absolutely performing at their best, one of the best things you can do is start a regular mindfulness practice every day, taking a few minutes, to practice some breathing, some movement which you match to your breath, so inhale to exhale, and then sitting in silence in meditation. If you haven't quite, so that's the ideal scenario, right? Because that's what builds the calm, the clarity, the focus, all these all the health impacts and things as well that come with it. But for example, if you are somebody who is in the middle of the day, say, you're in a very busy office, you've got multiple projects on, you've just come out of a meeting, you've got meetings ahead of you, you just like, oh my God, I've got to get through. email is like overflowing, and how is there so many more in the inbox from when I last sat at my desk? One of the most important things you can do, and I think one of the things which really is going to give you back time, is to actually step out of the office for a few minutes. Go and find a quiet spot. Maybe it's in the foyer. Maybe there's a private office that you can go and sit in, because most of us are in, we're in open plan these days, right? Sit down, close the eyes, don't take any devices with you, and just breathe. You can either just watch your natural breath, so just close and just, watch the inhale coming in through the nose, watch the exhale leaving through the nose. The other thing you can do is, if I sit up a little bit, you can put your hands here and you can just breathe into the ribs. The ribs come out to the side and exhale down. Maybe do that 5 times, 10 times, if you're feeling very high level of anxiety, maybe 20 breaths. Maybe if you just feel like, I just need to just calm this down, maybe 5 or 10. Even doing something as simple as that can just give your head time to clear, get yourself out of the situation. I guess another thing I would say is that, say if you work in the city and you're lucky enough to have like the beautiful park near, like we did in Sydney, like the Botanic Gardens. If you've got half an hour for lunch, instead of kind of going and sitting lunch at your desk, which is a terrible habit, right? But hey, guilty, have been very guilty. You can do it at home.
You must have done that.
I have
I just quickly need to get this email done.
I've got a rainforest in front of me as well, where I live. Actually getting out and walking in the park. If it's a nice day, take your shoes off, walk on the grass, like focus on, your footsteps, focus on the breath, or focus, if you've got birds around, you can probably hear the bellbirds outside here, like focus on what things that are going to take you away, because they know as well, things like forest bathing, as they call it, is amazing for your mental health, and it can just just touching the grass with your feet can make you ground down. So I think those are some of the things that you can do. I also would say that if you know that you're prone to some anxiety and overwhelm, and say it's because you know that you're in a meeting with senior leaders, instead of rushing into that meeting, so back to back, proactively take some time in your diary, schedule 5 minutes before your meeting, and go and breathe, just like I showed you a second ago, for a minute or two, and get centered and say, okay, like, I'm going into this meeting, I'm focusing on X project, I need to close out all the other things for that half an hour, whatever it is. These really simple techniques, they can have a profound impact on you. I was recently working with a director of comms who works in government, and she was really, really struggling with her senior meetings, and also she has to do presentations, and her job requires her to do that. So we worked together for a while on her growing her breath work and her meditation practice, so that she could come into these situations and feel very calm and confident, and like she was managing the stresses that were coming at her. And the difference from like the first session to the last session is incredible. And now she said, like, through having a daily meditation practice and then using these techniques when she needs to in the moment, now so she can get up in the morning and she does not feel stressed all day. Whereas before, she would get into work and the stress would hit by mid-morning. So, and she was only spending 20 minutes in her morning. So, and you don't even have to spend as long as that, pre-work. You can spend 5 minutes and still have profound impacts.
I love that saying that we have, because we always say it, but I don't think anyone actually associates the real meaning with it. We go, I need to take a breather. And we don't actually breathe when we're taking a break. We take our phone with us, or we go and speak to our manager, or whatever it is. We don't actually take the time to breathe. So thank you for reminding us that actually taking that time to breathe is super important, and it doesn't have to take long. Like you said, it can be 10 breaths, it can be 5 breaths, as long as that gives you that mental clarity. I have a really story on point here from one of my managers. And when I was working with him, I was really junior, and I was still, super eager to do everything and to stay late at work and to do all of the things that I suppose young people, have a lot of energy and time. And I didn't have children at the time and so on. So I had that drive and that energy. And he would intentionally put 10 minutes in his diary in between every meeting to reset and to I suppose center himself around what the last meeting was, to put himself in a positive space about the outcomes of the next meeting and what he wanted to achieve from the next meeting. And he would literally quieten down. He would leave the office, and we would all be like, where is he going? Like, is he having coffees every hour? You know what I mean? I suppose we were taking the mickey because we didn't really understand what was happening. But I never saw that person get cranky with anyone. I never saw him, being critical or feeling annoyed after a meeting. He would say, well, that was that meeting, and now we need to get to the next one, and here are the outcomes. And as we got closer and we started working more and more together, he kind of enlightened me with his practice. And he would say, every time a meeting finishes, that's the energy we leave that the moment is now finished. We need to move to the next stage or to the next meeting or to the next thing that we have in front of us. And here are the outcomes. And he would set his intentions for that next thing that he would have in his diary. And I found that absolutely amazing at the time. And I suppose that rubbed off a little bit on me. So now, before every meeting, I kind of sit down and go, okay, so rather than if you've had a really stressful meeting and you've just come out, rather than going straight into the next thing, I now take a few minutes, go for a quick walk outside, or just, as you say, sit down, breathe, close my eyes. And I find that really helps. When we had our first discussions, I know we were talking about some of the work you do with leaders about managing unwanted emotions, because as we know, there's stressful situations, there are meetings that don't go to plan, or the right stakeholders don't turn up, or not reaching the decisions that we need to be reaching for the business. Whatever happens, there are moments of stress, of heightened intensity, of anxiety. Some of the tips and tricks that you shared with me, I thought were really, really on point. Could you share some with our viewers now? If there are any unwanted emotions, how does Rhian Thomas handle that situation, and what are your tips and tricks for this?
Yeah, look, I think when you're in the moment, and this mindfulness thing, this whole mindfulness practices and things, whether it's like your old boss stepping out and taking a moment to reset and, set a fresh intention and just like clear, so that energy's left behind. Mindfulness is like a circuit breaker, right? It is when you stop and really manage yourself, because this is what it's about, right? It's about, firstly, in order to stop yourself being reactive in these emotionally charged situations, you have to have a level of self-awareness. And otherwise, how can you know what's going on in your body? And it's quite amazing how disconnected we are from the body as a modern society. I think, if you think about all the people who've got allergies, but yet they're still drinking, say you're lactose intolerant, you're still drinking milk, but you're not listening to the fact that it's not working for you. And it's the same with, our emotions and things like that. If we're not tuned into those signals, so, if you're starting to feel angry, maybe you feel that knot of frustration building up in the stomach, or maybe you start getting a bit sweaty, or you start grinding your teeth, you're not going to be able to sort of stop your emotions in their tracks and take that pause. So really the starting point is having that awareness of what are those physical changes that are going on in your body when you are getting, stressed out by something and potentially going to react in a negative way. I know, you can, if you're not aware of those things, you can start by maybe just having a journal pad somewhere on your desk or at home, wherever those triggers might happen, and say, oh, when that happened, I noticed that I'm doing these kind of things.
Yes.
So then when you become aware, instead of, you know, just going, oh, the first thing that's going to come out of my mouth, it's about being, take a breath, pause, don't do anything, let it settle, maybe take another few more breaths. But it's, or even, you know, if you're feeling that it's that bad, actually having the courage to step away from the situation and say, and excuse yourself and say, actually, just a minute, I've just got to go and whatever, and then come back composed and then handle the different in a situation in a different way.
Yes.
So it's about not really letting, you know, the emotions take hold of you bringing the emotions back in and managing them and saying, no, because I don't want the because you will know, right, if we have negative emotions in work and we know that that outcome is not going to be good. So it's about taking charge and saying, okay, I need to either take a few breaths or I need to walk away from the situation for a few minutes, or even say, actually, something's come up really urgent and I'm going to put a meeting in your diary and we're going to come back and talk about this. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck in this cycle of just repeating behaviors that you don't want and that are not desirable. And also, you know, if you think about then the output, that the impact that has on the people around you, because that creates a toxic environment and it's not good for the team. And it's, you know, if you're thinking about yourself as a leader, like, how do you build trust if people can't trust that you're going to be, you know, calm and able to manage a situation with empathy or compassion or, you know, in a nice neutral position. So those are some of the things I'd say. And, you know, if you know that you've got those reactivity issues, really you are somebody who should be starting to practice mindfulness every day as a daily practice. So that, because then what happens is that, as I was saying to you earlier, that I found with myself when I was younger, it suddenly starts infiltrating your life and you're not this reactive person anymore. You're actually and considered, and you're not letting those things get to you in the same way that you used to, you know?
Yeah. I think that's spot on. I have, and, you know, by all means, I strive to do a daily practice. I don't necessarily do a daily practice every day. And that's, you know, part of my journey as I'd like to get better at this. But I have definitely felt the difference between, you know, pausing and understanding what's going on and not reacting in the moment. I think that's been a big thing for me. And then coming back to it with a fresh set of eyes, with, you know, fresh mind, and going, okay, well, actually, did I read this right? Or did I read like too much into it? Did I give my emotional response versus, you know, actually the reality was whatever that, you know, situation was?
I think what's really interesting about what you've just brought up is that quite often when we react to a situation, we're reacting from a place of like past experience. So sometimes we're reacting because we've been in a similar situation before and it's actually a trigger for us.
Yes.
So, you know, also being able to see that as well. Sometimes it's just that, you know, they call it karma in yoga. We don't have to call it karma, but it's basically past experience. That's what we're really talking about. So then quite often something triggers you, you've had, you know, something to you in the past, and then you keep reliving that. So then what we want to do with mindfulness practices, like I said before, is we want to break the circuit and stop that happening. We're not still, you know, we're not making that behavior choice every time now just because something is reminding us of something that happened in the past that made us feel, you know, humiliated or guilty, or, you know, because there's all those, often those emotions sitting behind it you don't really talk about, right?
Well, that's right. And it's almost like an autopilot. It's an autopilot reaction, right? Because that's how we reacted before, and the body and the mind have learned that. So that's how we react every time. Well, if you pause and you step back and you go, okay, that perhaps was too strong, and I need that moment of stillness and quietness to actually recompose myself.
Yeah.
Um,
I think if I can add here as well is that what you start noticing as well, so if you start acting that way yourself with the composure, but then
Yeah.
if you work with other people in the business who maybe haven't got to that point, actually your behavior has a real influence on them. So it has a really massive knock-on effect as well, which is something that we
Yes.
don't think about. And I know I've worked with people in the past who have been quite difficult, but I've really, and don't get me wrong, it's irritated me, but I don't let that come through. And I've breathed through it and say, no, I'm going to just let that just bounce off me. And then the massive change that I've seen in the relationships that I've had with those people has been huge. And it has really changed a relationship around, because quite often sometimes, you know, it's not really you that they're responding to, it's something else that's gone in, it's not personal. But then if we start all acting in this way, it has a ripple effect out through the organization, and then it becomes such a much more pleasurable place to be, and makes it much better to interact with everyone and build better relationships, build more trust, get more done, deliver better results for the business.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like be the change you want to see, right? You kind of have to start from yourself, and you have to take responsibility for yourself first. I know we talk a lot about the corporate setting and the corporate context, and there's been a lot of chatter about mindfulness in the workplace and how do we encourage more mindfulness in the workplace, and different techniques and different classes during lunch hours, and doing yoga, doing, meditations and so on. From your practice and from what you have seen, does this work, or is there a better way of doing it?
Look, so I think that if you do something in a tokenistic way, it's going to have a tokenistic impact, right? So, you know, if somebody, I've gone in and I've done one-off lunch and learns for businesses, for example, and I know they, you know, on things like World Meditation Day, and they've really enjoyed it. But there's only a limit to how far that can go. And, you know, I think it's quite often, you know, mindfulness practices like yoga and meditation and breath work done every now and again, or once a week class, you know, can get a bad rap because they're like, oh, well, it's not going to make a difference. And, you know, it might introduce people to it, but they're right, it's not going to make a profound difference. So I think there's a few different things that you can do, you know, if you're really serious about, you know, growing people's productivity and their connection and things like that with their, you know, with the wider team, with their employees, you know, you can do things like group meditations on a regular basis, maybe even hold a class, or maybe even give funding, you know, for people to say, hey, you know, we'll actually pay for this. If you're super serious about embedding mindfulness practices in the business, I think, you know, even doing something like at the start of a meeting and having a meditation, you know, it can just be for like a minute, just to ask everyone to say, hey, let's just make sure our devices are off, let's give ourselves permission to be fully present, you know, and let's have our joint intention for this meeting. We want to get through the agenda and have some good outcomes. Let's all take a few deep breaths together. And then you can, you know, from there, like, I think you can have a really profound impact on, you know, on the way that people are in the business. But I think also, you know, leaders like you know, like the leader you worked with, I mean, it was great that he was going off and doing that. But then if there are leaders in the business who've got these practices, sharing that and like leading by example and showing, you know, and talking about the massive impacts that they can have. I think there's some of the ways that, you know, you can start doing things in the business, you know, pretty much now. Guaranteed, you know, especially if you work in a large organization, there's going to be, you know, real ambassadors for mindfulness already in that business that maybe you don't even know about. But then on a you know, on a more of a one-to-one level, you know, if there are leaders who need that in the business, then, you know, looking at working with somebody like me one-to-one, so we can really work through the you know, the challenges that those leaders have, and come up with, you know, real custom tools that they can use, so that they can have a real profound impact on them and the way that they work and the people.
Yeah, I think that really resonates, because as you said, how, as a leader, do you build trust and do you build engagement with your employees if you're reactive, if you are anxious, if you are not really present in the moment? And I think the working relationship strains for everyone. From the leaders that you've worked with, I think you've probably seen real life examples of what mindfulness has on engagements with their team. Like, what are some of the examples that you can share? You were talking about the communications director earlier. How did her team feel after she was more mindful, after she was more present?
I'm not actually sure, because we really focused on more of her presentation side of stuff. But I can give you an example from somebody else that I worked with. So I worked with this director who worked in kind of like big sort of mining projects, and he found that through doing mindfulness training and things with me, that it started to really change the relationships that he had. So, where there was conflict, and then instead, once he started practicing, he noticed that then, because he came to the meeting with a different intention and a different attitude and a different way to be present, that actually their relationships improved. So then you find that throughout the team. So they know, for example, like there's so much research on meditation, but one of the things they know is that if you're doing things like group meditation, it really improves things like collaboration and connection in the team. So those are some of the things. We also know that because UC Davis in California have done a lot of study on meditation, and we know that it grows the gray matter in the brain, which increases our capacity for learning and memory, which obviously then has a knock-on effect with our productivity and our concentration. So we know that businesses are much more productive. So team members are more productive. They're getting on better. So there's all these sort of impacts around that. And then if you look at things like health and well-being, because of the way that mindfulness practices lower cortisol, they take you into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is associated with rest and digest, rather than the sympathetic, which is fight and flight, which you kind of get more of those negative emotions. We're seeing then this massive impact on things like cardiovascular health and blood glucose, and managing different symptoms that people might have around that, with diabetes and things like that. So then if you think about that, then it's also impacting the wellness of your workforce, which is also critical, right, for productivity and performance. So if we can make sure that the workforce is, they're being productive, they're working with each other well, their health is better, then if they've got stress and anxiety, they've got a way to manage that. We have these, that's just 5 things that I've mentioned just here, right?
Yeah. And I think that's fantastic.
Impacts. Yeah.
I think when, perhaps this is my context, but when I talk about mindfulness, I've kind of imagined people in a room together, doing a meditation together, or being in a yoga studio, or whatever the context of a team. Like, could mindfulness also be employed when we're working remotely and when you have a hybrid team? Because I think a lot of the companies nowadays have all of these different working arrangements. What have you come across something that also works for a hybrid team, or that can be a good tool for them to use while working remotely, and bring them together to be able to collaborate, to be able to build trust, to build that engagement?
I think, even just like if you're having a video call like we are right now, the fact that you start that with a mindfulness activity. So be it whether you do breath work, or you say, let's set the collective intention for this meeting, or it's about saying, right, I want everyone to just, show me turned off your phone and just be really present, give yourself permission to be here. You can do those kind of things on your Zoom meetings. I think if people want to connect and have like mindfulness practices, as a collective whole, I mean, something you could talk to the comms and the HR team about is like, can we put, meditation in the whole organization's diary? It's going to be, maybe there's 3 slots a day, and we want, choose your slot that's most appropriate. And then people go and they do their mindfulness activity whatever that would be. Maybe there's even things on the intranet, right, that they can do. We still call it the internet these days? I'm not sure.
And social media. I'm sure there's internet.
Internet for me still. But, maybe having things that people can download so that they feel like even though they're not in the office, they can still access these tools. Because, a number of years ago, we probably wouldn't have dreamed of doing so much online. But now all of this is opened up to us, and, let's capitalize on it so that even if you are away from the main team, then there's no reason why you need to miss out, and you can still feel like you've got that opportunity to connect practices. Even if you're hundreds of miles away.
Yeah, and I think that probably will create more connection with the team rather than the actual work itself. That hitting a pause together and setting that joint intention will undoubtedly, make people trust each other more and make them more believe in the outcome that they're creating. They're co-creating that together rather than launching into the work and doing.
And I think one of the things that I've always thought personally is that really it's about the team that you're with, if you're in a good team and they all really get on with each other and they have a connection, then you collaborate really well and you get better outcomes. When you don't have a team that's got that, you not often notice that team is not performing as well, right? So I think just all of that threading together, it just makes a lot of sense for the businesses,
Yeah. I think undoubtedly there's probably a little bit of stigma out there connected to mindfulness and connected with yoga, and people, think it's hearsay, or people haven't tried it and don't really believe in the outcome. And what would your advice be to people that are not convinced?
Look, I think until you've tried it, don't knock it, for sure. And I know it can seem like, oh, how can something so simple have such a profound impact? But the fact is it does. And if you don't believe me, get in touch with me. I'll send you a whole heap of research. But get onto Google, do a whole heap of research. There's a load of things there. But I think, be curious. Like if you're struggling with things in work, or maybe it's even outside work, like you're not sleeping well or whatever, you're getting a lot of anxiety, like give it a go, because it's better than going to the doctor and getting some pills. Try something where you have this, because we have these amazing tools in our body. They're just sitting here. They're free. Like all we need to do is activate them. So I'd say don't knock it until you tried it, because the girl I was telling you earlier about, who's director in government, she said to me when we started our sessions, I can't meditate. And I was like, yes, you can. You just have to be taught how to meditate and find the way that works for you. But, I guess, and I have got a session coming up as well. So if people are curious,
I was going to say that's a perfect place for us to mention your upcoming workshop. Please tell us a bit more about what that will teach people, and how, if anyone is interested, how can they get in touch with you?
Cool. Well, I will pop the link in the chat in just a second. But basically, it's a meditation and mindfulness masterclass, and it's happening on the 21st of March. It's happening at 10 till 11 Australian Eastern Standard Time. And basically what we're going to be going through is a few of the benefits and things of meditation and mindfulness, and how they relate to working in a corporate environment, be it, a leader of a team, or maybe it's, you're an employee, but also down to the personal benefits of it. And then I'm actually going to take you through guided meditation. I'm going to be talking about all the things you need to do to succeed, basically, because sometimes people think, oh, it's not working because I'm just sat down for 15 minutes. It's like, no, it's not going to work because you haven't prepared. So I'm going to be going through all that kind of thing. So I'm going to just drop the registration link in the chat just now.
Yeah, fantastic.
And
so otherwise, is keen to try it and hasn't done it before, so there's no previous experience required for this. People can just drop in.
Yeah, or maybe you've tried, right, and you found that I couldn't really get it, or maybe it's been a while since you've done it. So just come along, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. My name is Rhian Thomas. There probably aren't too many of me being a Welsh name, but you can find me through Christina's profile. But come along and try it, because, I know that I have people coming to these sessions and, experiencing quite a profound difference in just a short amount of time, because that's the thing with meditation and mindfulness. We're not waiting for the impacts. It's not like you've got to be doing it for a year before you feel the impact. From the first time you do it, you are going to receive the benefits, and the more you do it, the more benefits you will receive over time.
Yeah, fantastic. Something to mention about the workshop: it is absolutely free, so people don't have to pay a cent for this.
No, they don't.
And although it's happening in Australian time, if you're not based in Australia, I love the LinkedIn community, and I love the global nature of the LinkedIn community. So if you're based somewhere else, hop on the link. You can register, and if it happens so that your time zone works with the time, then that's fantastic. You would be happy to host non-Australians and anyone that wants to try this. Yeah, fantastic. And that will give you a real chance to experience what mindfulness is all about and how you can incorporate mindfulness in your corporate context. And I love the fact that, even though this workshop is an hour, like some of the tips and tricks that Rhi shares, they don't take an hour.
No,
meditation can be as quick as 10 breaths. It can be as quick as 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever time you've got free. It's making the time and the space and holding that space, so you protect it and make sure you get the reset needed for you to operate at your best and to be as productive, as creative, as collaborative, and as open to other people.
You have to make the time for yourself.
Yes, and be the change you want to see. I think in the corporate context, maybe a lot of people are expecting their leaders to lead the way. And although that would be amazing and that would be nice, I think sometimes we just have to step up and be the leader that we didn't have, or the leader that we wish we had. So, set by your own example, and you can lead your team, you can lead your peers in that transformation journey. It doesn't necessarily have to be led by leadership. If we're coming up to the top of the hour, so I'm going to start by doing some closing remarks. I wanted to say, if you wanted to connect with Rhi, please find her on LinkedIn. Otherwise, Rhi, I think we will drop Rhi's website on the chat as well if people are interested, and we'll also drop the link for Rhi's upcoming workshop. Just remind us of the date again, Rhi. You said it was the 21st of March.
Thursday, the 21st of March, so it's next Thursday, and it's 10 to 11 Australian Eastern Standard Time. So that's, if you're in New South Wales, it's at that time, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. And it's absolutely free. This is your come, try it, see if you like it. And if you don't like it, all you've done is invested an hour. But I bet you most of the times you'll take away some practical tips and tricks that you can employ in your daily lives that will bank the benefits of you taking and hitting that pause.
Absolutely. I know. It's tried and tested. I know it works.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Rhi, thank you so much for that enlightening conversation. I really enjoyed our time here together. If anyone's got any follow-up questions, if you're watching this as a replay and you wanted to reach out to either myself or Rhi, please feel free to pop that either in the chat or, again, connect with us on LinkedIn, and we'll be able to answer any questions, queries, thought bubbles. If you wanted us to run this conversation again, more than happy to hold that space for you so you get a dose of mindfulness for your daily busy corporate lives.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Rhi, anything to add before we close?
Well, obviously, a big thank you to you, Christina, for having me this morning, or I should say this afternoon. I've really enjoyed it as well. It's been really lovely to be on here. Thank you for everyone who's joined and to everyone who's taking the time to watch the replay. Look, I would just say that there's not really a reason not to start a mindfulness practice. It's got too many benefits. In the way that we live with, so much distraction, so much complexity, so much just being on the go all the time. We need to start giving ourselves permission to stop and take a few breaths and really reconnect with and with our deeper selves, and not stop connecting with all the external, be more connected with the internal, because when you're more connected with the internal, that's when you make better decisions, and it has a big impact on a whole heap, your overall well-being, and it also has a big impact then on what you're doing in your job as well. So yeah, and look, do reach out. I'd love to talk more. I also offer things like, a clarity call and things, so people can jump on and do that through Calendly. I've got all of that on my LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a good place to start. Find me on LinkedIn and then DM me or comment on one of my posts. And look, I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. I bid you a productive yet full day of being present and being creative. Goodbye.